Video games are pretty sick. I enjoy my fair share of games, but what makes them feel good? Some might say the mechanics, or the art style, or the music. It might be the specific way a character runs, or the sensation of pulling off a perfect combo. I've been working on my own game prototype for a third-person parkour game called Project Feline, featuring wall running, grinding, and an anime-style character. There are lots of games with parkour mechanics out there, but they don't all feel the exact same. Why can they all feel different despite their mechanical similarities? The answer is game feel, and in this devlog we'll be focusing on the aesthetics of game feel and how by adding small amounts of polish and some music, I was able to breathe new life into the Project Feline prototype. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Game feel, the intangible, tactile sensation experienced when interacting with video games. Good game feel, sometimes referred to as game juice, is when a game's most basic mechanics feel satisfying, even after the plot, scoring, level design, music, graphics are all removed. The term was popularized by game designer Steve Swink, who states that there are 4 major areas of a game that can be used to cultivate game feel: input, response, context, and aesthetics. Input relates to how well the control scheme is suited to the game. Response relates to how responsive the game is to the player's inputs. Context relates to the various scenarios and environments in which the player will use the game's mechanics and inputs. And aesthetics, also referred to as polish, relates to the various audio and visual effects that influence the player's senses, such as the footstep sounds on a character's feet or the firing sound of a weapon. Throughout the development of my game, Project Feline, I've been very fortunate to be able to explore and test these areas of game feel with my community. From as early as my first prototype, I received very positive feedback on the game's control scheme and responsiveness. More recently, my goal has been to develop the game from that prototype into something more representative as to what the game could be. Over the past couple of episodes, I've been documenting my process behind creating a fully playable map, complete with models and lighting to help bring the vision of Project Feline to life. The only area I hadn't really addressed were those small aesthetic tweaks and effects to enhance the game feel. Until now. To enhance the game feel of Project Feline, my first priority was to revisit some of the animations. Animations play a significant role in determining how it feels to control a character, especially in third-person games like my own. I made these initial animations some 10 months ago from the recording of this episode, and if you want to learn more about my animation process, I will link that episode in the video description. I'm animating this character using a technique called limited animation, which intentionally removes the in-between interpolations of her movement to emulate the style of Japanese anime. I received some feedback suggesting that the limited animation technique was attributing to the animations feeling stiff. So let's analyze that. I've got her skate animation here at 24 frames a second, limited animation, and the same animation at 60 frames a second. To me, both of them still look stiff, so I'm not convinced that it's the frame rate that's responsible for this, but rather the posing. Granted, I only spent about 2 weeks on these animations, and since then I've had a lot more practice. So I thought it would be a good idea, while focusing on game feel, to revisit some of these animations. I haven't redone all of them yet, but I've just focused mainly on the ones that needed the most attention. So I first started with changing the skate animation to a run animation. I thought skating was a cool idea at the time, however, upon testing it with the gameplay, something didn't quite fit. The action of skating is slow, relaxed, and rhythmic, and I felt that an action with faster movements, like a run cycle, would help the game feel faster without necessarily changing Gabby's movement speed. I also changed Gabby's idle pose. The previous one felt a little too masculine and hunched over, so I made a new pose with her standing more upright and confident to better reflect her character. While these changes may be small, I felt that they were a significant improvement compared to the old ones. Next up on my to-do list was to enhance these new animations with some special effects and polish to give the game that extra sense of tact and responsiveness. Firstly, I added footstep sounds and dust particles to make Gabby feel more present in the world. At this point in time, I had no experience with any of Unreal Engine's particle editors, so instead, to save time, I looked to the Unreal Marketplace. I used the Niagara Footstep Pack by Sidearm Studios for the particle effects, and the Footstep Effects Pack by Tim Winandy for the sound effects. To implement these to Gabby's character, I used animation cues to play those footstep effects in sync with when Gabby's feet would touch the ground in her animations. I also finally got around to adding neon trails to Gabby's feline suit, using the Cascade particle system. I also utilized the art of screen shake. For every action Gabby performs, such as a wall ride, a run, a jump, or a land, the camera will acknowledge it and react. It's subtle, but good screen shake can really enhance the game feel. By using Unreal Engine's blueprint system, I managed to program various camera states to react to Gabby's actions. When Gabby runs, the camera pulls back and widens the field of view to increase that sense of speed. Anime speed lines will populate the edges of the screen depending on how fast Gabby is moving. And when Gabby rides a wall, the camera frames her at a third of the screen to allow you to see what's ahead. And when Gabby slides or grinds on a rail, the camera starts trembling and pulls back to emphasize her momentum. It's my hope that the game feels much better to play with these new effects and camera states. In the previous episode, I focused on lighting techniques to help make the game's environment feel more anime. It was definitely an improvement over the previous build's lighting, but I wanted to take it a little bit further and sand off some of the rough edges. In that video, I talked about an effect called the Kuwahara filter, a common post-processing technique used to make images look like oil paintings. In the last episode, I couldn't find a performance-effective way to implement this, but just in the last week, I found a better solution, and I've now applied a brushstroke filter to the environment. It's very subtle, but it makes everything look just that little bit more like anime. I also readjusted my lighting, made use of softer shadows and stronger indirect lighting to further enhance that polished look of anime backdrops. I also turned on all of the post-processing effects: bloom, ambient occlusion, color grading and lookup tables, depth of field, vignetting, chromatic aberration, and more to help the game feel a bit more cinematic and polished. Straying away a bit from the fundamentals of game feel, I believe that music can also play a big influence on how a game feels to experience. I think a game's soundtrack can really help set the tone and the mood of any particular level. My approach to music is very hands-on. I'm not really that interested in notation or how theoretically good a song is. I'm more interested in how a song feels. I want you to look at that picture for me. I want you to look at it. And I want you to hear this. I know my playing is really shit, but listen to the sound. And it just, to me, that's yep, that matches. I compiled as much reference as I could, such as images, songs, and various sounds that gave me the feeling that I wanted to go for. I then used those references as inspiration to compose my own tracks. Over the course of a week, I worked on 6 different demos. Here are some snippets from those demos. Now this demo I really liked, but I feel it didn't quite fit with the Skyport level. However, I did feel that this track fit very well with the time trial mode I had developed earlier. Ultimately, this was the demo I picked for the Skyport level. I used Logic Pro to compose these demos, and my workflow is pretty straightforward. I have a template I use which breaks the track down into color-coded categories such as bass, chords, drums, effects, melody, pads, and rhythm. Again, I'm not much of a music theory guy, and I'm not certain if this is all the correct terminology, but this is how I understand and break down the music that I listen to. Several months ago, Project Feline wasn't much more than a rough gameplay prototype with a few test maps. Now, the game has a fully modeled and playable level, polish on the core mechanics, new animations, effects, and music. I still don't know exactly what Project Feline will end up being, but I'm always learning more after each iteration. I believe that as a game developer, you're making more than just a game. You're crafting an experience. You're building a thing that someone is going to sit down with and play. Building a satisfying experience can take a long time, but throughout these last few months, it's been really fun to learn how mechanics, characters, levels, art, and music all play their part in crafting that experience. I'm glad that I've taken the time to explore these other areas of my project, instead of just narrowly focusing on one thing to the point of perfectionism without considering the bigger picture. I still have a long journey ahead of me, but after the release of this devlog, I'll be taking some time off the project. After I regain my strength, I'll be coming back full force with a fresh set of eyes, and we'll see what the future may hold for Project Feline. Thank you all so much for following my development journey. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe, and enable notifications so you don't miss the next devlog when I return. These devlogs are funded by all of my wonderful supporters on Patreon, and I'd like to give a special thank you to my top tier supporters. If you'd like to support the production of these videos, you can make your pledge via my Patreon linked in the description and get access to exclusive rewards. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitch, Instagram, and Twitter for more updates in between devlogs. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.